Time for another board game review, and this time we have the game Rambo the Board Game. This was sent to me by Everything Epic, and it's designed by Chris Bartarlis. Replay your favorite scenes from the movies or forge your own path to victory with 52 highly detailed minis, including 2 choppers, over 100 gear and tactics cards, tons of intricate map tiles, and 10 epic heroes to become. Embark on 2 story campaigns of war, with 20 unique tactical and strategic missions in this diceless, stealth-based, guns-blazing action-adventure thrill ride back to the 80s. They also sent First Blood, but it's the same rules, just a solo version, so I'm going to be showing you mainly the base game. Let me show you how to play. So Rambo is a cooperative game. You have a whole list of missions in this mission book. That tells you how to set things up. It's all based off the movies, I think. I have not seen a Rambo movie, so I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, every mission has a objective, also mission failure things. But let's just kind of go through how the game works. First, each player is dealt a threat card. These are dealt to you face down, and you don't reveal them until it's your turn. And then each hero takes a turn. So let's just go through that. First, on your turn, you clear any persistent effects. Some effects in the game, whether positive or negative, are persistent, and so anything that was activated last time gets discarded. Same thing with any armor tokens. We'll get into that later. You return those to the supply. So then you reveal your threat. In this case, it's crippling fear. This says if at least one hero is at red alert, all heroes gain an alert. In the alert, we'll talk about this a little bit later. Your character has an alert meter, and it can go up. But since nobody is in red, it doesn't do anything. But however, this says you may not move or use actions this turn unless the team discards a total of 2 Valor. Valor we'll get into later. But basically on your turn, you reveal a threat, and you do the effects. Then you choose what is called a stance. So Rambo here has 4 stances. Now let's pretend that threat thing didn't happen. We're just going to go through a regular turn. This arrow here tells you how many actions you can do. This tells you how much alert your stance raises or lowers this turn. This tells you how much you can move. This tells you any armor tokens. If you see this is healing, and this is Valor. Valor tokens. So, for example, if I picked Beat Feet, that means I can move up to 4 spaces, I can do 1 action, my alert goes up 1, and I get an armor token. Once you've chosen your stance, then you can do moving actions and tactics in any order. So movement, you can move orthogonally or diagonally. You may interrupt your movements to do actions or play cards. If you have this yellow terrain here, that means you got to use 2 movement whenever you cross one of those lines. If there are red terrain, which is not on here, those are impassable, and you can't go into a space that is occupied by another figure. Let's say Rambo goes, okay, 2, 4, or something like that. Or you could go 1, 2, in this case, I'll have to reveal the Fog of War, which we'll get into in a second. You can play tactics cards. Tactics cards are something like Become War. You must discard another tactics card to play this card. It gives you a persistent effect, which gives you +2 movement, +1 action, and +1 alert. You have +1 damage on all your attacks. One of your actions you can do is you can spend an action to draw a card from your tactics deck to get more cards. You can also attack an enemy. We'll go into that in a second. Or you can activate a special point of interest action token if you are adjacent to it, which we'll also get into. You can always play 1 tactics card each turn. If it has a persistent effect, it will be discarded at the start of your next turn. You can also discard tactics cards. You see this little symbol down here to give you Valor token. That's not it. That's not the right token. What am I doing? This is a Valor token. And how Valor tokens are used, you can use these to enhance your attack. When you make an attack, you can spend a Valor to increase the damage, 1 for each token. You can also block damage using a Valor token. You can also enhance your movement. Basically, they just give you a bonus +1 for each you spend. Now, these cards are Fog of War cards. When a hero enters a space that is adjacent to one of these, you flip over the card and you reveal what is on the other side. In this case, there's an old lookout tower. You orient it, matching the red arrow over there. Okay. When you move, you always count spaces, but areas you use for range. In this case, the 4x4 square areas. Anything that is white dashed lines is cover, which gives you a -1 damage for cover resistance. Also, if your alert level is low enough, you are actually hidden while in these spaces. Another thing to note about Fog of War is that enemies do not trigger them when they go near them. Gear cards give you special little perks. In this case, Rambo's knife. You can only use it on adjacent enemies. You can only target one. It does 3 damage, and you get an alert when you use it. However, if you are at green alert, you get an extra damage, meaning 4 damage and -1 alert, which is pretty nice. So this is a great item for stealth kills. Ranger boots, if you have +1 movement if you start your turn in cover. Those are some gear effects you can have. When you find gear, you can equip it. You have 4 gear slots. Well, I think it depends on the mission, basically, but when you're playing campaign mode, you can also take gear from your stash with you on subsequent missions. Whenever you take damage, you use wound markers. If your health track is ever completely full, you take what is called a wound, which you place this wounded thing on one of the stances, and now that means for the rest of the mission, you cannot use that stance, and then your damage gets cleared. Once the mission is done, these will all be cleared, but this will make it harder and harder to progress if you take too many wounds. In fact, some missions will fail you if you take too many wounds. Armor tokens, like I mentioned before, these can be used to block damage. You spend them to do so. The alert track I also mentioned, it goes up and down. Depending on how high you are, certain cards can have certain effects. You can also use stances like, in this case, meld, to reduce it. A -2 alert in this case. Visibility is affected by your alertness level. So, if you are green, you are hidden everywhere. If you are yellow alert, you are only hidden in cover. Orange alert means you are hidden to enemies outside your area, but visible to enemies in your area. And red alert, all enemies can see you. Now let's go over attacking. Let's say we have an enemy over here. If I had a military pistol like this, I can check the range. In this case, it's 1, meaning I can shoot 1 area over. I can shoot 1 target. It does 2 damage, and it raises my alert once. If I have not moved, I can add 1 damage to this attack. So, you choose an enemy figure that is within your range and has a clear line of sight. To check line of sight, you just draw 2 imaginary lines from any one corner of the attacker's space to 2 adjacent corners of the target space. If there's any red terrain in the way, you can't, but this is a clear shot. And then all you do is you just deal exactly how much damage your weapon tells you. If I hadn't moved this turn, this would be 3 damage to the enemy, and you can mark it. If they have any resistance stats, which this is not the right thing, but if it was the Vietnamese guard, that would be 2 resistance, so they would take 2 less damage on that. And you can use Valor to increase that attack if you would like. Then, once you've attacked, you raise your alert, depending on how much sound that weapon made. As far as enemies go, all enemies have a range, how many targets they attack, damage, movement, resistance, and also how much health they have. So they have special abilities like the Vietnamese Scout. When this enemy spawns, any hero within 3 spaces gets an alert. And they also have activation behaviors. In this case, this one moves toward the hero with the highest alert level, attacks the closest visible hero, moves towards the hero with highest alert that this figure has not attacked, and then each adjacent hero gets +1 alert. Sometimes Fog of War cards will have you spawn enemies onto the board. Certain cards will have initiative letters or deployment zones, so that'll tell you where they spawn, but otherwise you can choose where the nearest legal space. After all the heroes finish their turns to round, that's when the enemies activate. So if we have these 2 in play, the Vietnamese Scout and the Vietnamese Guard, there's an initiative token on this one. Whichever one has that token, those enemies activate. They do all their activation behaviors, and then this token will then move over to this card on the next round. If an enemy card activates, but there are no enemy figures of that type, then it just goes on in the order. Then, after the enemies have activated, then you check your mission dossier. In this particular mission, the objective is to reach the Vietnamese POW camp, which is point of interest 1. Mission failure. Well, first off, let's look at the battlefield conditions. At the end of each round, in the first one, you would spawn a Vietnamese scout in the hero start area. If it was the second round, all heroes get an alert. So different things. At the end of round 5, you fail if you have not gotten that. So you track your rounds with this giant knife and bullet. And also in this particular mission, any hero at red alert at the start of their turn, you fail the mission. If any hero has 3 wounds, you fail. Or if you don't get to the POW camp by the end of round 5. There are also points of interest, including a POW camp. That's where you need to go to win. A lookout tower, which we saw, which if you activate it, you can use 1 action to remove this POI and look at any Fog of War card on the map, which is extremely useful. There's also a hole somewhere underneath one of these Fog of War cards where basically you might find something. In this case, a shovel. So that's pretty much the game. You go around, these Fog of War cards activate as you go, hunt down enemies, try not to get killed, and try to get to your objective. And that's pretty much the game. So I have never seen a Rambo movie in my life, but I do admire how much love was put into making sure there were tons of characters, scenarios, and details. I just showed you the first scenario, but there are a lot of characters and missions to make this a very full Rambo experience. But since I've never seen Rambo, that means all I have to rely on was the gameplay, which is pretty good. There were 2 things I enjoyed most. I like the whole stealth mechanic, where you don't want to raise too much alert, and you can get bonuses in kills for being undetected. It does make you feel like you're sneaking around and being a badass, dispatching guys secretly. The other thing is the whole switching stances, where you have to pick a different stance each turn, and sometimes depending on situations, some cards might be like, oh, you can't pick these stances, or if you get wounded. I like that. I always enjoy that you can't stay here, pick any other space mechanic in board games. The Fog of War is fun, not knowing what's going to appear makes progressing through the level very tense. The overall combat, though, is okay. It's funny, on the box it's like, diceless, which is it's sort of bragging that it doesn't use dice, which I understand because, dice can be very luck-based. But because damage is automatic in this, it feels a little more like a puzzle game, because you're like, okay, I know exactly how much damage I do to that guy and that guy, so I'm trying to sort of do that, which isn't a bad thing, but it doesn't make me feel like I'm playing like a risky sort of war game or something. It just makes you feel like I'm doing almost like a little puzzle. So it's hard because people are gonna be like, oh, but you always say dice is luck. But see, I don't mind luck in a game if it's exciting or balanced. I'm not even saying adding dice is the right move here, but I just want to point out that it felt a little sterile, being like, oh, you're just kind of go here, get that guy for that much damage, go here, do that. The round structure can also be pretty finicky, also making enemies move. It's all a little too finicky, considering how simple the combat is of I do this much damage and I do this much damage. I feel like it could have been simplified a bit. The minis are a little disappointing. They're all the same color, so it's hard to find specific ones or differentiate them. I was expecting a little more from that. The main question is this game worth getting when there are so many other games like it out there? I would say the obvious thing first. If you are a die-hard Rambo fan, yeah, definitely worth getting. There's a lot of love put into it to make it feel like, thematic to Rambo. However, if you are like me and you don't have any attachment to Rambo, I think this game is okay. It's decent. It's a little fiddly. I think there are some cool mechanics. It's just lacking in some pizzazz to make it stand out amongst other games for me of its ilk. But it is like a competently made game, which is nice, because for licensed games, sometimes it can be a crapshoot. There's definitely love put into this, but I'm not a Rambo fan, so the gameplay wasn't enough to make me love it more than other games like it.